History remembers great generals as masterminds. Cold, calculated, infallible. But what if I told you that some of the most decisive victories in all of human history, battles that toppled empires, changed borders, rewrote the fates of nations, had almost nothing to do with genius? What if the difference between victory and defeat was simply luck? A general who won because his enemy made one catastrophic mistake. A revolution saved by a blizzard. An admiral who should have been annihilated, but wasn't. And an army that somehow managed to defeat itself. These are the leaders who didn't plan victory. They stumbled into it, and history gave them all the credit anyway. War, they say, is the ultimate test of human will and strategy. Armies drill for years. Generals study maps for weeks. Tacticians calculate every angle, every flanking route, every possible chain of events. And then the first shot fires, and everything falls apart. There is a term for this. The fog of war. The chaos that descends the moment a battle begins. Supply lines collapse. Messengers get lost. Soldiers panic. Horses bolt. Rain turns roads to mud. The perfect plan, the one your general spent 3 months designing, dissolves in an instant. But here's what history rarely admits sometimes, that chaos works in your favor. Sometimes victory arrives not because of your brilliance, but in spite of your mistakes. And in those moments, history was changed by accident. Case 1. Napoleon at Austerlitz. The bait that worked too well. December 1805. Central Europe. Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of the French, faces an army that outnumbers his own. The combined forces of Austria and Russia, two of the great powers of the continent, have gathered to crush him. 85,000 men against his 72,000. By every rational calculation, Napoleon should lose. His advisors know it. His enemies know it. And in the days before the battle, Napoleon does something that seems, on the surface, like a terrible mistake. He deliberately weakens his right flank. He pulls troops away from the southern part of his line, leaving it thin, exposed, almost inviting an attack. It was bait. He wanted the Allies to see the weakness. He wanted them to commit everything to breaking through the right side of his line, because while they were doing that, he planned to strike their weakened center like a hammer. The Allies did exactly what Napoleon hoped. They threw their weight at his right flank with ferocious confidence, and for several terrifying hours it looked like the bait had become a catastrophe. The right flank was crumbling. French soldiers were dying by the hundreds. The line was bending. And then the fog lifted. Literally. A morning fog that had blanketed the battlefield dissolved in the winter sunlight at precisely the right moment, illuminating the Allied center, which had been stripped to almost nothing to fuel the assault on the right flank. Napoleon unleashed Marshal Soult's corps in a devastating counterattack. They punched straight through the middle of the Allied line like a blade through paper. The battle was over in hours. The coalition was shattered. Austerlitz is still taught in military academies as one of the greatest tactical victories ever recorded. Napoleon planned most of it, that is true. But the timing of the fog, the exact degree of Allied overconfidence, the precise moment the counterstroke landed, those were not planned. Those were fortune. Even Napoleon, in his later years, admitted how close it had come to disaster. The Battle of Austerlitz, he once reflected, was the finest I ever fought. But fine and fortunate, it turns out, are not mutually exclusive. Case 2. George Washington, Battle of Trenton, a desperate gamble in a winter storm. December 1776. The American Revolution is dying. Not slowly. Quickly. Catastrophically. Washington's Continental Army has suffered defeat after defeat. Men are deserting in droves. Enlistment contracts expire at year's end, and Washington knows that when they do, he may have no army left at all. He has perhaps 10 days to do something, anything, that can remind his country that this revolution is worth fighting. He is out of options, out of time, and nearly out of men, and so he chooses the most dangerous plan imaginable. On the night of December 25th, in the middle of a fierce nor'easter, Washington orders his army across the Delaware River. Ice floes are crashing through the dark water. Sleet stings the faces of exhausted soldiers. Horses scream in the cold. General Knox, Washington's artillery commander, is screaming orders over a wind that threatens to push every boat sideways. The crossing takes 9 hours longer than planned. But here's where accident enters the story. The Hessian forces garrison at Trenton, hardened professional soldiers hired by the British Crown, were not, as legend often claims, drunk on Christmas wine. What actually made them vulnerable was something far more banal, the storm itself. Their commander, Colonel Johann Rall, had received intelligence warnings that Washington might be planning a move. But in weather like this, no sane general would march an army through a nor'easter at midnight. He dismissed the reports. The storm that nearly killed Washington's crossing was the very thing that made the Hessians drop their guard. Washington hit Trenton at dawn. The battle lasted 45 minutes. The Hessians surrendered. Nearly 1,000 prisoners taken. Not a single American soldier killed in action. It was, in the context of a crumbling revolution, a miracle. The Continental Army's enlistments were renewed. Morale surged across the colonies. The revolution, for the first time in months, felt survivable. And it was survivable because a December blizzard made the enemy think no one was coming. Case 3. Admiral Yi Sun-sin, Battle of Mongyang, 13 ships against the world. 1597. The Korean Peninsula, Japan, under the warlord Toyotomi Hideyoshi, is mid-invasion. The Japanese Navy has just annihilated the Korean fleet in a catastrophic defeat. 169 ships destroyed in a single battle. The entire Korean naval force has been effectively obliterated, all except 13 ships, and one admiral. Yi Sun-sin is Korea's greatest naval commander, but even his own government doubts him now. The naval command had stripped him of his rank months earlier, tortured him, thrown him in prison over a political dispute. He has just been reinstated, but only because there was no one left. He inherits the remnants of a broken navy and receives orders from the king. The 13 remaining ships are to be disbanded and their crews moved to the army. There is simply no point, the king reasons, in keeping a navy that can't fight. Yi Sun-sin refuses. His reply to the king is one of the most famous dispatches in Korean history. I still have 13 ships. The odds were not just bad, they were mathematically absurd. But Yi had chosen his battlefield with exquisite care. A narrow strait called Mongyang, where the Yellow Sea funnels between mainland Korea and a small island. In open water, 133 ships would annihilate 13 in minutes. In a narrow channel, only a few ships could engage at a time. He was turning geography into armor. But even that wasn't enough. What saved him was the current. The strait at Mongyang reverses its tidal current multiple times a day, and Yi had spent days studying its rhythms. When the Japanese fleet surged forward, he held position and waited. The current shifted. Dozens of Japanese vessels, suddenly fighting against powerful opposing tides, lost formation. Ships began colliding. The Japanese admiral, watching chaos spread through his fleet, was shot dead by a Korean arrow early in the engagement. The psychological blow was total. Yi's 13 ships pressed forward into the confusion. The Japanese fleet, a force more than 10 times their size, broke and retreated. Yi Sun-sin did not accidentally stumble upon the idea of using the current. He studied it deliberately. But no plan assumes the enemy will cooperate so completely with your strategy. The speed of Japanese disintegration, the degree of panic, the fatal loss of their admiral, those were not planned. Those were the unpredictable gifts of chaos. Case 4. The Battle of Karansavez, the army that defeated itself. 1788. The Austrian Empire under Emperor Joseph II is preparing to fight the Ottoman Turks. It is an enormous army, roughly 100,000 men gathered near the town of Karansavez in modern-day Romania. The Ottomans have not yet arrived. The Austrians are simply waiting, camping, preparing for battle. What happens next is, depending on your perspective, either the most embarrassing military incident in history or the funniest. A detachment of Austrian hussars crosses a river to scout for the enemy. They find no Ottomans, but they do find a group of local merchants selling schnapps. The hussars, doing what soldiers throughout history have always done when there is no immediate fighting, begin to drink. Then the infantry arrives. The infantry also wants schnapps. The hussars, unwilling to share, set up makeshift barricades around their supply. An argument breaks out. Someone fires a shot, whether in anger or by accident, no one will ever know. It was either a misunderstanding, a joke that went catastrophically wrong, or sheer drunken panic. Whatever its origin, the effect was instantaneous. Infantry soldiers who had heard the shot and the cry assumed the Ottoman attack had begun. They turned and ran. They crashed into other units marching up the road who, seeing men fleeing in terror, assumed the worst and also began to run. Cavalry, unable to identify friend from foe in the darkness, began firing into the fleeing mass. For hours, the Austrian army fought itself. Thousands were killed or wounded. The entire force was thrown into chaos. Emperor Joseph II was thrown from his horse into a stream in the confusion and nearly drowned. By morning, the army had scattered across miles of countryside. When the Ottoman forces finally arrived at Karansebes 2 days later, they found the field already littered with Austrian dead, killed by their own comrades, and a town completely abandoned. They claimed victory without firing a single meaningful shot. Why? Accidents decide wars. The chaos beneath the strategy. 4 battles. 4 very different moments in history. And in each one, the outcome was shaped less by the genius of the winning side than by the failure or the misfortune of the losing one. Commanders make decisions with incomplete information. The gap between what they know and what is true is where accidents are born. Soldiers panic. Officers misjudge. A single misheard order or a stray shot in the dark can cascade into catastrophe. Fog at Austerlitz. A blizzard at Trenton. The tidal current at Mongyang. Nature has no allegiance, but it has a habit of picking sides. It's the enemy that assumes it cannot lose is the enemy most likely to. Rao dismissed the intelligence reports. The Austrians weren't even watching for the Ottomans. War is not chess. It never was. It is a collision of thousands of individual human beings, each making imperfect decisions under enormous stress in conditions of chaos and terror that no training can fully simulate. Strategy provides the framework. But it is chaos, beautiful, terrible, indifferent chaos that usually decides the outcome. Conclusion. The role of fortune in history. History has a way of tidying up its stories. The victors become geniuses. The defeated become fools. We carve the winners' names into monuments and write their portraits into textbooks, and we forget. Or perhaps we choose to forget. How many times the whole story could have gone the other way? Napoleon might have lost Austerlitz if the fog had lingered a little longer. Washington's men might have frozen or drowned in the Delaware before they ever reached Trenton. Admiral Yi might have misjudged the current by an hour. The Austrians at Karansebes might never have found that schnapps at all. The margin between triumph and catastrophe is, almost always, razor thin. And somewhere in that margin lives something that no general can train for, no emperor can command, and no historian can fully explain. And the men who were lucky enough to be standing on the right side of that chance, we call them legends. Now before going somewhere else or jumping to another video, subscribe me for more such interesting videos, and also press like. So this video shows in feed of more people and press bell icon. So every time I upload new video, you know what to do.